Welcome back. The Competition Commission has launched its inquiry into online markets that facilitate transactions between businesses. This in order to gain a greater understanding of the online markets in South Africa. The Commission also wants to know whether there are factors that are hindering competition or undermining public interest. Online intermediation platforms include e-commerce, marketplaces, online classified marketplaces, software application stores and intermediation services such as accommodation, travel, transport and food delivery. Tembinkosi Bonakele is a competition commissioner. He joins us now to talk about this. So all of those that I have just outlined as forming part of the investigation or the probe that you'll be carrying out, are there those that are exempt, and what is the reason for that?
Well, it's almost like everything that's in SABC, because these days, whether you are going to be booking airlines, booking hotels, ordering food, you almost need these online platforms. But there are those that we have already dealt with, like your e-hailing services. We've just concluded a market inquiry in March for that, and we've got some firm recommendations, so there's no need for us to go back there. And then there is a huge issue about, the preferences that the likes of Google and so on have on advertising. That we have excluded as well, because it's a huge issue that needs a separate focus. So we try to be focused whilst covering as many of these intermediated services as possible.
Okay, so we'll get to some of the major ones that you're looking at in just a moment, but basically you're looking at discriminatory, exploitative treatment of business users, and you're also looking at how all of this is impacting on the participation of SMEs and HDP owners. What brought this about? What necessitated this?
If you think about it, these are fast-growing markets. I mean, not so long ago, all of these services, you needed to do them directly with the supplier. But now there is always a platform that intermediates between you and the supplier. And the growth in itself does give rise to a potential possibility of dominance. And when you have dominance, markets can reach a tipping point where you all of a sudden will have a single platform or two platforms that provide that service. And that will have a huge impact on the ability of others to participate. Take, for example, you have online trading that's already taking place. You have only about 2 or 3 firms accounting for the bulk of that trade in South Africa. What will happen when the majority of consumers all purchase their clothing through such online platforms? So these are the things that we are concerned about, the possibility of markets being dominated by 1 or 2 players in the long run.
So let's talk about an e-commerce, for instance. There's, and I mention these companies because they appear on what you're looking at specifically. Takealot, Superbalist. They are substantially larger than other online platforms. Is there anything wrong with that, or are they creating a niche market that is forcing people to be dependent?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, one has got to be balanced in looking at it, because there are efficiencies sometimes that come with scale, and online markets tend to be kind of a network markets. So the network effects of those markets are such that one builds up the customer base into a very large pool. But we have to be very careful. Much as we have some efficiencies that could be derived out of that, we learn from Europe and elsewhere in the world. But you also could have a lot of discriminatory practices and abusive practices against other businesses as well as consumers when you have these platforms. So it's not about stopping the growth of that sector, but it's about putting appropriate regulatory framework and scrutiny over it, so that the way it develops is not in such a way that ultimately it will harm consumers and large and small and medium enterprises.
So in the food and transport markets, for instance, I mean, we know the major players. It's almost like they are synonymous with those industries. You can't think about food delivery without thinking of 2 entities. You can't think about e-hailing without thinking of others. So what are you seeking to do, and are you going to be able to prove that they are dominating the markets because of uncompetitive market practices, or are they just simply good at the strategies that they employ?
It seems to me that dominance is something that we are going to be able to reach a conclusion about very quickly, because as you say, I mean, if you look at food delivery, who does that better than Mr. Delivery in major centers of South Africa today? So it looks like dominance, we will overcome it quite quickly. The issue is whether their practices are in fact an abuse of such a dominant position. In other words, are they excluding other participants from the market, or are they exploiting consumers? These are the questions that this market inquiry must find out. And I cannot predict what the outcome will be, because otherwise I would be kind of prejudging the issue before the investigation is finalized.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, you yourself say, Mr. Bonakele, that the names of some of these companies are only coming up because they've been used as examples of possible unfair practices. Tembinkosi Bonakele, Competition Commissioner.